Hi, thanks for coming today and doing this Skype interview with me for my channel. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Subal. Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity for this as well. It's super exciting.
Yeah, I think it will be very valuable information that you're willing to share with the audience. As you know, many expats are watching this channel and they're really looking for information about Switzerland, about how to come here and to work here. So I think they'll find it very, very useful. So without any further ado, could you maybe introduce yourself for the audience so that they see who you are?
Sure, happy to. I'm Ketaki. I come from India, from the northern part of the country, which is Delhi. I completed my education in India. Actually started with finance and started working for a consulting company first. Soon realized that that's not where I saw myself in the future and switched gears into human resources. I did my master's in human resources and then worked in Mumbai for about 4 years before finding myself in Switzerland. So I moved over to Switzerland with my job and have been now here for the last 5.5 years. I've lived on the German side of Switzerland as well as now on the French side. And on a personal philosophy side, I think what makes me or what wakes me up every morning or what motivates me every day is the belief that if you really want to achieve anything in life, you can do it as long as you believe truly and deeply and heartily in it.
Yes, and I find what's really interesting is that you basically came to Switzerland via India, via company transfer. Could you tell us maybe a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. I started working for a Swiss company in Mumbai, and that was Novartis. So which was of course quite small at the time. It was about 1,300 odd people, and I would find a lot of times my family and friends mention like, okay, this is a good multinational company. Do you see yourself reaching or working there? I said, well, it's probably possible for projects and so on, but it didn't look like that there would be opportunities where you could kind of move there. But I think with the work that I was doing and the opportunities that were coming up as Novartis was expanding and growing as well, I got an opportunity. And yeah, there was a regular interview process as well around that. But being an internal candidate, I think it became a fairly simple move for me.
Yes, and as I say in my previous videos, it's probably one of the best ways to do the internal transfer because you're not competing on the application process with other expats. I mean, you're only doing the internal process, which is much faster. And of course, you need to have a job to apply to, but I find it's probably one of the best ways, especially for non-EU. So you're in basically human resources for a big multinational company. Could you tell us maybe a little bit about your tips for expats who want to apply for a multinational and have no clue where to start, or what are some of your insights on that?
Sure. So I think how I would kind of segregate the expat population is by EU, non-EU, because I think there's a very different process for EU nationals and non-EU nationals. So for
Yes.
EU nationals, I think it's a little bit more simpler because of more freely movement of people across the borders, and also the fact I think that people, EU residents can come to Switzerland and look for a job while living in Switzerland for I think about 3 months, which of course that's not the case for non-EU workers. So I think for non-EU workers, the way I've seen from my social network, people come over is either because they were already residing in EU and then they found a job opportunity that brought them to Switzerland, or they were studying or went applying to a university in Switzerland. So there are two big universities that are actually very strong, which is one is ETH, which is based in Zurich, and the other one is EPFL, which is based in Lausanne. And both are extremely strong, and the people passing out of these universities are setting up all kinds of startups, but also doing very well, and they're very successful um, subsequently as well. So they've got these two are the ones that are actually well known globally. So that's the other way that people come in. And then the third case is, for example, my case where I got an internal transfer with my job itself.
Okay,
So
so Do you have any other tips in terms of the application process or how to make it basically in the selection to enter a company?
Sure. So I think in Switzerland specifically, the Swiss market is very particular that you share your resume, which is everyone needs that, but also a cover letter. And I think globally, this is a trend which is not so much where people are sometimes don't need a cover letter. Many companies are allowing you to apply for jobs without cover letters, but Switzerland is not one of them. And they really appreciate that you have a cover letter, even though it's not an asterisk requirement, but they want that, and a cover letter which is not a very generic one. They want to see a very customized cover letter for the company, but also for that specific job. So it takes a lot of time to get a very good cover letter made, and I think that's what will help you stand out in the application and selection process. Because I think the first big leap, as you rightly also mentioned, is for the system, which is the tracking system, usually to kind of select that a specific candidate, right? And I think for multinationals, they are very open to people coming from non-EU countries as well, as long as obviously there is something that makes you stand out, or either it's a skill or the way that you have researched the company and tried to position it and put that as part of your resume as well. So some of the ways that you can kind of stand out in the initial selection criteria. And then, of course, in terms of how you come across, I think the Swiss market in that sense is very, very professional. They really want and appreciate people to behave in a professional way. And when I mean professional way, it's not only in terms of speaking, but also in terms of writing. So the point that I was trying to make about the cover letters, I see that they're very particular. The language needs to be formal. I see a lot of times for American companies sometimes that the language can be a little bit casual as well. But I think in Switzerland, the language needs to be super formal. And I think it also has to do with the fact that both German and French have the respectful part of you in their languages. So in French it's vous, and in German it's ihr, and I think those need to come through. And I think it's not just the words, but also then it reflects in the way they think and speak and behave. And so that's what that's my experience, and they're very particular about those. And I think someone who speaks French or German both, you can't just start saying, do to them, which is the informal kind of you. You need to be very particular, and only after a certain point of knowing them and developing a relationship do you kind of make that switch. So that's something that I learned of living here for the past 5+ years.
Yes, there's a certain level of formality. I think, would you have any differences maybe you picked up from the Swiss German to the French part, maybe in terms of culture that's interesting to share?
From the Swiss German, and I think the both parts in that sense, you in terms of the kind of things that you have. So in terms of the public transportation, the train schedules, and which I think most of the people across the world know that everything here is working to clock precision. So that is kind of similar on both sides. We have the same brands, grocery stores, and those kinds of things on both sides. But what is different from in both sides is that in the German side, you see a little bit more structure and formality. Whereas on the French side, I think I find the conversations and the people a little bit more in the flow, and it's a bit more easygoing, I would say. The other thing, commonality that I do find in Switzerland is that the Swiss like to do a lot of small chat. So, you will find people in the bus or the train, and, they will kind of start talking to you as though you're a very good colleague or well known to them, even though you just met them in the train or the bus. But it's something that I've seen a lot, that they like to do small chat. So, but I think that's only if you can speak the language, right? So you either speak Swiss German, which is quite different from High German, and so it depends on who you're speaking with, and then of course French is the same as France. So you should be able to speak that, or Italian for that matter, if you're on the Italian side then.
So yeah, if I understand correctly, so basically your perspective is definitely that there's two different cultures within the country with a certain level of formality. So now in
Yes.
terms of skill set, what would you say is important to have as skills, or where do you see the jobs in Switzerland in terms, especially with multinationals, which is really the target for most expats?
Sure. I think what I'm seeing a lot is that there's a lot of focus on digital these days. I mean, and that's not just specific to Switzerland, but it's actually a global trend as well. A lot of companies are moving to digital processes pretty much everywhere. So that's also one of the skill sets that's in big and huge demand in Switzerland. The other interesting areas which are picking up a lot of pace in Switzerland are blockchain, artificial intelligence, data scientists, as well as people who can lead digital transformation. Because I think where Swiss companies or Swiss based companies are focusing at the moment is moving to their all of their processes onto the digital space. So there's a lot of focus for people and specialists actually. So one of my learnings having lived here now is that Switzerland values specialism a lot, and if anyone is specializing in any of the fields that I just mentioned, then your chances of moving over can be quite high. The other piece of advice that I would share for students, especially, is the growing importance and relevance for STEM studies. So STEM basically stands for science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. So, which also kind of reflects in the kinds of jobs that I mentioned. So, like data scientists, or artificial intelligence, or digital, and so on and so forth. So, these are coming out of STEM basically, and that's kind of the future as we see it as well. But what I talked about here was more on the hard skill side. I also see that there is a growing importance for some kinds of soft skills, which is especially around, being able to work with people from all parts of the world. So being collaborative is a growing skill, but also showing emotional intelligence and empathy. And I think going on in Davos at the moment, and there's a lot of focus on how can we tackle global problems through empathy, through understanding each other's perspectives as well. So the whole concept of diversity gets a very different flavor, and I think that's seen in Switzerland as well. I mean, Switzerland, as you know already, is it's diverse in its core, having kind of four languages, national languages. We talked about the cultures already, how they are different, but at the same time well integrated. So yeah, anything that brings more diversity to the country is also valued.
Which leads me to my next question to you. How do you see languages in your success in Switzerland? What did you find in terms of how you can make it in a job? Do you need more than English to be successful?
So I think it really depends on how long you plan to stay in Switzerland. I think in the first 3 years or so, I don't feel the need that you need to know any specific language, any of the four national languages. But I think as you spend more and more time, so in my case, I've been here now 5+ years, and I have needed to then pick up both German because I was living on that side, and then now French as well, because it just doesn't help you to integrate here, which is, I think, an important part of living in a country. It helps you integrate, but also kind of know the information, what's happening around you, to understand the social life, the political life, economic life around you as well. So I think the Swiss government also makes it an important aspect of trying to integrate expats into their country, which is very unique, I feel. And this is my first time living in Europe, but I haven't seen many places trying to integrate, or the government making efforts to integrate expats into the cities where they come into. So in my instance, for example, when I came to Basel, the Basel government had offered me language courses, free language courses in the beginning for me to settle in, but then also tried to integrate me within my community. So similarly, when I moved to Lausanne, the canton that I'm part of, they also offered or invited me to kind of an evening within the community, so that I could meet people who live here, who also could share some of the activities going on around that I could either participate in or also hold myself, for example. So there is a lot of effort in trying to integrate people into the country, and that happens only when you can speak the language, the local language especially.
Absolutely. So I can completely understand that. So what would be some of your last thoughts, last tips for our audience?
I would just say that I think it's the Swiss market is extremely interesting and attractive. I mean, more and more studies come up with suggesting that Switzerland is a top spot for expats, for foreign workers. There is a gap that the Swiss government realizes, which is why it has been open to getting more and more EU and non-EU candidates into the market. And I think what's important is to keep an eye out for some of the finding the relevant skills. So we talked about some of the skills that are growing in importance. So either focusing on those and developing yourself in those specifically. Then of course, developing your language skills, I think is also very, very important. And I think on a personal front as well, how is it that you can really stand out? And one of the tips that I would share is like learn about yourself. What is it that you want from your life, from your career, and how can then Switzerland help you to get there? I've taken some leadership assessments myself. One of them was integrated leadership assessment that I can share details about as well. That helped me understand my strengths, what are my motivators, what is the derailers. Because I think when you get into conversations with corporates for interviews and so on, one is the hard skills part of it, which they see on your CV and they might have some questions around, but they also want to see how well can you position yourself, how well can you sell yourself, your ideas, how well can you get along with your colleagues and peers, and I think that part is also something that sometimes gets missed out on, but has an important is important ask for employers. And being in HR, I think I've seen that also highly developed.
Exactly. It's becoming now as important as the technical skills. So what kind of person you are, your behavior, basically, and that gets assessed more and more. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate all the juicy information you shared here. It's going to be extremely valuable for everyone listening and being tuned in. So thank you again. I really appreciate, and I will talk to you soon.
Thank you as well. Thanks for the opportunity as well. And I'll talk to you soon.
Welcome.